Good day. Welcome to another episode of the Cypress Hills Partners podcast. Dean Linden, Managing Partner of Cypress Hills. Today we've got kind of a special day. We've got a guest in, a native of Dade County, Florida. He was the 208th pick of the 1985 NHL entry draft. He's a 10-time finisher of the Leadville 100. For those of you that don't know, if you know, you know, the Leadville 100 is no joke. Currently, he's the head coach of the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. And Dallas Eakins, welcome to the big show.
Thanks for having me, Dean.
I can tell you're thrilled.
Well, it's just a little odd being sitting here chatting with you like this. It's usually
so we've been
in a living room somewhere.
That's right. We've been friends for close to 30 years. It's kind of in some ways it's sort of hard for me to imagine my life without your influence in it. So I'm particularly thrilled to have you share some of your thoughts on organizational culture and leadership today, because I think just as sort of a background for me, whenever you and I get together, it's the overwhelming theme that we address is culture and leadership. And I don't want to embarrass you here, but I think it's important to note, your story is unlikely. There's not a lot of kids from Dade City, Florida that end up playing in, a game in the NHL, let alone having the type of career that you did, both as a coach and as a player. And I think that one of the things that ironically, I've known you for 30 years, and I did a little bit of research on this, and during your time, for your 4 years playing for the Peterborough Petes, people that have been associated with that organization for 30 years said that Dallas Eakins was the greatest captain that they'd ever had. And I didn't know that. I hadn't known that. So I've only known you as a grown-up, and your dedication to organizational culture and leadership. I thought that was something that you just sort of picked up as a grown-up. I hadn't realized that it has permeated your whole life.
Yeah, you just thought I read a book.
Yeah, well, no, and that's and quite honestly, that's what a lot of grown-ups that find themselves in leadership positions after the fact, they're like, oh, I'm finding myself in a spot where I've got to lead, so I'm going to learn how to do that. You kind of did that in reverse. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about how that came to happen?
Well, do you want me to start right from the very start?
Well, was there somebody? I mean, was there somebody in your life that influenced that?
I think it started with my mother. The fast and dirty on my life. How I come from Dade City, Florida, is I was born in Dade City, Florida. We lived on a dirt road that was maybe half a mile long. Extremely poor. We lived in a trailer. Next to the trailer was my grandparents' shack. And then the next lot over was my great-grandmother's place that I thought was a shack. Although going back there as an adult to take my wife, hey, here's where I grew up, I learned that it was more of a shed.
Still there? It's still there, Dallas?
It had a tree through it. Not much is developed in where we lived in Dade City, Florida. But while there with my mother, I never knew my birth father. So it was just her and I. And my mom had to do anything she could to put food on the table. We obviously had help from my grandfather, who was a janitor at the local high school. My great-grandmother didn't work at all. I can remember walking with my mother and picking up bottles on the road, like to cash them in.
Right.
So that's kind of where it started. So I was always, I think I got the kind of, like, I think you have to work to be a leader. I think you've got to be extremely disciplined. to be a leader. I think both those things are really important parts of a culture as well. But it kind of got injected to me very early through my mother. My mom started dating a Canadian who was living in Dade City, Florida. He was a long-distance truck driver. He was taking loads. He would go over to Tampa, come back up to Toronto, Montreal, come back. They started dating. They eventually married. I don't even know if you know this. Maybe you do. When I was born, my last name was Yoder.
Yeah.
Yoder.
Funny enough, I learned that this morning.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good day for you, Dean. So my mom remarries. My stepfather, the only father I knew, he fully adopted me. I took his last name. It's interesting. Like there's out now, like literally no documentation of my last name anywhere. My original last name.
Right.
So when I was 8, my dad decided he had had enough of being gone a long time, and we picked up and we moved to Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. And it was there where, again, you know, my dad had obviously a big influence on me, but my mom dug in, started working at as a cashier at a convenience store. You remember those old Max Melts?
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know if they're still around.
Yeah.
She started as a cashier, and by the time she passed away very early at 51 from cancer, she was running all of the stores in Eastern Ontario. So I think it all kind of starts there.
I remember the summer your mom passed away, and you know, I remember how you dealt with that. You were around us a lot that around that time. Maybe not right at the time she passed away, but sort of in the subsequent months afterwards. And it's hard as a 54-year-old guy now, and raising kids myself, you know, what that, you know, it was hard to have a lot of empathy then, just because it was I had lots of sympathy, but I couldn't have imagined how that felt. I mean, how much of that experience, you know, your mother dying relatively young and kind of, you know, you were on your own by that time, like you're a self-sufficient man, but you know, at what point in time do you kind of get that sort of reckoning that, you know, no one's coming to save you anymore? Like when your mother passes away, you're on your own. Like for the first, you're sort of emotionally kind of put like, yeah, I'm left on my own here. You know, how much did that contribute, if any, to your leadership journey?
Well, I think you're really developed by your environment and the people around you. And you have to make a choice as that person on going, hey, I like how that person is treating me, or I like how that person is treating others. So when you go to my mom, like we didn't even know my mom was sick. Like she literally was driving from store to store, went and checked herself into the hospital, an emergency with stomach pain, and she was dead like 10 days later. She
Never
was
left.
Infested, with cancer. I was playing for the St. Louis Blues at the time. I got word. I came home, and she literally sent me back out the door after 2 or 3 days. Now, I returned just before she passed away, but she knew that I was battling for a spot. She told me, "Hey, I'm going to be fine. You get going back out there. You've got to get your career looked after, and when we get more news, you can come back, or everything will be, you know, whatever it is." So my mom was famous for never looking after herself, but always looking after others. And then if you take,
there's a clue right there.
Yeah, and it's coming. And like and not to jump around too much, like you know, obviously my father had a big input in my life, but the guy that was like my second father, well known in Vancouver, there's a statue of him outside the arena, is Roger Nielsen.
Now, how did that come together? Because I've heard you tell stories about Roger Nielsen
forever. I first went to his camp when I was like 12 years old or something, and I met him there, and I ended up being a counselor at the camp. and once you're a counselor at that camp, you get to know Raj super well. He ended up coaching me, but him and he was like my second father. And again, though, someone who rarely looked after himself and always looked after others.
Right.
And so like through that and through things in my childhood that you pick up along the way, it always resonated to me that, looking after others, I enjoyed it, whether it was as simple when I was a little kid. Hey, I'm going to go pick up the garbage on our street. I'm going to hold the door open for this lady. Like just little things like that. I always enjoyed helping others. And for me, the leadership part of it's very, very simple. It's having a positive effect and influence on others for their behalf.
Mm-hmm.
And the last part's the most important part to me. It's, yeah, sure, do I get some gratification from it? It makes me feel good. Yeah, but when it comes to leadership for me, it's never, okay, we're going to do this with my hockey team so I can have success. Or
right.
We're going to do this for my family, for me. In my head, it's always, I'm going to do my best to have a positive effect and influence on this group, on this person, for for them and no one else.
Right.
And for me, I think the way that's resonated is very well, and it's been very validating quietly for me, whether it's been friends. Right now, it's mostly former players that are always in contact with me. Hey, I've got this going on with my team. I got this going on with my family. They're calling to look for help or some direction, and that does feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've had some kind of positive effect on them,
right?
And they're looking back to you again. So I think we're all a sum of our experiences. Most importantly, the people around us. But the big thing is there's a whole lot of people walking around this planet. They had the right people around them, and they chose not to take in the good part.
Yeah,
and the biggest thing for me in life. Always is discipline. And because each and every day, like, today, I woke up this morning, you got to start making, you're in different circumstances all day.
Right.
All day. Like, and you don't really even understand it consciously a lot, but like circumstance. And every circumstance, you've got to make a choice.
Right.
Which way am I going to do? Which way am I going to go with this? Like, what's my response going to be? And in that choice, you have to have discipline. And in that choice kind of reveals your character too.
Right.
So that's kind of like the wide spectrum of the leadership part to me.
So you've got this, you've got this authenticity that draws you to leadership. Like you're coming at it from a truly authentic place, because I think for a lot of people that are attempting to be leaders and are struggling to be leaders, they're acting in a way that's not authentic to them. And my son talks about, riding the bus on the way to a football game, and one guy will stand up who is clearly, watched Remember the Titans and stands up at the front of the bus and says something, and everybody kind of rolls their eyes like, oh my God, like that was terrible. And the guy kind of gets laughed down. Another guy will stand up and say something, and it'll send goosebumps down your spine, because you know that it comes from a place of authenticity. It's truly that whatever he says or whatever he does is authentic. And you're a guy that absolutely has that. But I want to touch on something, because I think it's remarkable. I want people to know the lengths at which you will go to sort of, you're not happy just with your own authentic leadership qualities or your leadership character. You also go outside a lot. Like
before we go to that,
yeah.
let's there's one thing that I really think there's
hang on a second. Is this still my show?
Yeah, it is. But
okay.
I want to go back to the authentic part, because I remember somebody saying this to me early on when I started coaching, and I looked at them sideways,
Mm-hmm.
and then I heard it more and more, and it was somebody was out there promoting it at some time, fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
That's the biggest bunch of bullcrap I've ever heard in my life. Like,
right.
Because if you're going to lead or even be led, mm-hmm. I think a big part of leadership too is being comfortable being led at some points too. But you have to be authentic. Like right. You have to be yourself, and you have to be comfortable in your own skin, because the thing I know for sure, if you're trying to be something else or stand up at the front of the bus and you've memorized some speech you saw on the TV, that's not working, man.
Right.
It's not. It's just not. Like you have to be really comfortable with the things that you believe and that you think it's going to resonate with others. Now, that doesn't mean you shove it down their throat. That means you be authentic to who you are, and then you try to find ways that you give parts of yourself to others.
Yeah.
Because all of you is not for all of you. But maybe this little part or this idea or something that I might be able to plant in your brain grows into something bigger.
Yeah.
And so that authenticity
well said.
Is, for me, it is number one on the list. Yeah, if anyone's out there like fake it till you make it, like just...
Yeah, I think
don't
when it comes
do that.
I think when it comes to leadership, like the authenticity thing, because there's lots of different ways. There's not one way to lead, right? But I think everybody has leadership qualities in them, provided they've got sort of a constitution that they live by, and they're I can see that's who you are, and you're imparting that on me. Great, I'll follow that. But if I get and we're sensitive beings, right? If I get the inclination that Dallas doesn't really believe his own bullshit, like he's just kind of saying, you're going to lose me quick, right? You're going to lose your group quick. They're going to be like, that guy's out for himself, or that guy doesn't care about me, or that, because we're sensitive. We know that on some level, right? We're picking up.
And always evolving though too. Like it's always, evolving. Like, my leadership style 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I was the mm-hmm. captain of the Peterborough Petes, when I was a kid at school, like whatever it is, like it's always evolving. Like right. It's constantly evolving. And I think that's super important. And I think that's where you're going. You're about to go.
Where I'm about to go. I'm glad you sort of, you bridged that nicer than I did, actually. Yeah. Good job. You're a great broadcaster too. So I first learned about your summer field trips a few years ago when you called me up and said, "Hey, can I stay at your place for a couple days?" And I'm like, "Sure, Dallas. What's going on? What could you possibly need to do in Seattle?" And you said, "Well, I'm going to do a little field trip I'm going to embed myself with the Seattle Seahawks for a week." And sure enough, you flew into town. You bunked down at my place, and every morning you would head off to the Seahawks facility. Subsequently, since you did that embedding with the Seahawks, I know that you've done it with the Dallas Cowboys, and most recently you went to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to embed yourself with the very secretive Alabama Crimson Tide football team and Nick Saban. That might be the coolest summer project of anybody that I know. Maybe just talk a little bit about it, to the degree that you're comfortable in the specifics, but certainly give us the generalities of, some of the things you've learned from those, well, both from the leadership perspective, but maybe more importantly from the organizational culture, maybe the difference amongst those groups and that general things you've observed.
That's exactly what it is. So the way I started doing this was when I was a player, I was extremely limited. Like
you mean as a talent?
I wasn't great. I wasn't a good skater. I didn't have much skill. I was extremely fit and I was tough. Like that was it. Yeah,
but not very big. But not really big enough to be as tough.
No, it was like 200. Like I'm way skinnier now, but like I was like 200 pounds. And
Wikipedia has you at 195, but I don't want to. I don't want to call you a liar.
It also has my birthday wrong.
Oh, okay.
But what I would do as a player, and Roger Nielsen hooked me up with this great gentleman who just passed away just over a year ago. His name was Alex Angelic, and Alex was a coach in Europe. And so kind of in my mid-career when I was really scrapping to stay on NHL rosters, I would go over to Europe for 10 days. And I would go over there and I would train with Alex and I would train with the European teams, and it was all about skill, and that was it. And it really benefited me. Like I got better. So then when my very first year of coaching, I was the assistant coach in the American Hockey League for the Toronto Maple Leafs, their minor league team. Finished my first year of coaching, had a great mentor there, Paul Maurice. He had already coached probably 500 games in the league, maybe more. And I thought back to my playing career, and I was like, I can't just sit here in the summer. How do you get better in the summer as a coach? As a player, you go train. As a coach, what do you do? Just sit around? Like, so what I did.
You mean it's not driving a boat?
No. But what I did that summer immediately, I went to Finland, and I went for 2 weeks, and I put myself into the team in Tampere just to see how they were training, how they were coaching there. And it was far different than what we did. So they were very interested in the stuff we were doing. I was very interested in the stuff they were doing. I got something when I left. I left something behind. And then as the years have gone by, so you mentioned the three, but I've been into Major League Baseball. I've been into the NBA. I've been in with Pop in San Antonio. I've been in with the Raptors. I've gone to Mizzou football, the Cowboys, Pete Carroll, Seahawks. Like,
wow.
Like anywhere I can go, I will go. And the interesting thing about all those other sports, like I played baseball, so I understand the game. I played basketball a tiny bit in high school. I don't know anything about football. Right. I could literally name 3 positions. I don't watch it. The teams that I do go in on, I try to keep track of them to see how they're doing. But I've gone into these teams for different reasons. So the first one I went into was the Dallas Cowboys. I was coaching the Edmonton Oilers at the time. I reached out to Jason Garrett for 2 things. I wanted a team that was highly scrutinized by the media because we were that in a Canadian market. And I also was interested in how he manages a huge staff. Like in the NHL back then, we had 2 assistant coaches, but the staffs were starting to grow. There's more athletic therapists coming on. There's 2 and 3 strength coaches. It just keeps growing out. And I knew that was happening in the NHL, but I wanted to see how a head coach in the NFL manages 22 assistant coaches and all of these players. So I went there for that reason. You know, we again, I left with some. I think I left something behind too. You know, Pete Carroll, I think it was actually you. It was you. We got talking one day about culture. I started telling you what I thought, and you said, hey, you sounded like a little bit like Pete Carroll. And I didn't know much about Pete, so I went and I read up on him and went in with him. And more of, I wanted to go in and just feel, not see, but feel what that culture felt like. Now, if like Pete's a 10 out of 10, he's the real deal. When you see that stuff, that is him. That's not some skit he's putting on. Like, he is upbeat, he is positive, he is competitive, all those things in one. You know, Pete's like a 10 out of 10. I think our program's probably, because that's not totally me. Right. That is totally him.
So going back to the authenticity side, if you came back from spending the summer with the Seattle Seahawks and all of a sudden you're like coming in with like the Gangster Paradise theme music, walking into the team room, you'd be like, okay, Dallas has flipped his wig, and you'd lose
they think something's wrong with you, right?
Yeah,
so
but Pete, as a 70-year-old guy, somehow, because that's who he is, he can do that, and he can run that program. And it's a different.
And then with like Coach Saban, it was all about, you know, my favorite word in this life is discipline. Like, I don't care. You go through your day, through your career, through your family stuff. I don't care what. Like, discipline is everything. And I've been a big fan. I've read a lot on Nick Saban and his mindset on how you should live your life and how you should conduct yourself as a coach and a player has always resonated with me. Like,
Right.
I'm like, that is in my alley.
Right.
But so going in with Coach Saban, number one, I couldn't believe I got in there.
Yeah, that's what I couldn't believe.
It was a process to get in. He was incredibly gracious with his time. And again, Nick's a serious guy.
Yeah.
Like it's on when you're there. And so, when you come to what you're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do when I'm going in there, I'm looking for, is there anything, not that we can change in our group, but what can we tweak?
Right.
Because change will probably not be us.
Right.
A tweak will be us.
Right.
And then the other things that happen in there, it's amazing how when you go in, you're like, okay, we are on the right path here.
Mm-hmm.
We are on the right path. We're doing
because sometimes as a leader,
check marks
sometimes as a leader, or when you're trying to establish culture, you're kind of out in the wilderness. Like when you're trying to push the envelope or trying to find your culture, so few of us actually have the good sense to sort of look out in the way that you do it, just for even that confirmation that, yeah, you know what, we're okay here. Like we're because I know that in our group, I relish in our culture. I love it. I love it. But I kind of look to you, actually, because I remember, back in Seattle when you came, every night I would debrief you and because not so much what you had learned, but what you could teach me, right? And how can I sort of maybe, steal a little bit of that and put it into our own culture here at Cypress Hills.
So like, if you think about this, like, so all these teams that I've gone into, and I could tell you a little story about each and every one of them,
mm-hmm.
but there's one overriding theme that just brings it all together all the time. And so if you're looking to build your culture, if you're looking to lead a culture, whatever it is, it's really, really simple to me. And all you got to remember is be what you want to see. And you got to remember that. Like you've got it. It's not, what's the old saying?
Where did you make that saying up, or was that written someplace, or did you see it?
I don't know, but it's the truth. I must have. I don't think I made it up. I must have picked it up somewhere. But it is the overriding theme of everything. So with my staff now, with our trainers, our coaches, everyone, like, we want these players to conduct themselves a certain way. We want them to really be invested in what we're trying to do. And I'm constantly reminding our staff, like, be what you want to see. Like, that kid walks in and he's got his shirt hanging out and his hat on backwards. Now, if you don't love that, or if we don't love that as an organization, well, we can't be walking in like that either.
Right.
Like it's just like little things like that, or the way you speak, or whatever it is. But like, if you're going to be a culture driver, you better be what you want to see. You can't be something else over here. And I know it's all different. So like for me, I want my team to be fit.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to have a fit team. That's important to me, not only from a fitness side, but from a mental toughness side, right? Okay. So I don't walk in there 30 pounds overweight.
No, you don't.
And you know what? There are a whole bunch of coaches that are way better coaches than me that are heavier guys.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's separate, right? Like that. They're great coaches. They're way better coaches. They've got way more success. That's okay. I'm not walking in my room and preaching fitness and being overweight. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to go in my room and talk about mental toughness and not be mentally tough.
Right.
Like, that's just not the way it's going to go. The other organization that's probably had the greatest effect on me when I was in San Diego, I have had the incredible, humbling, grateful experiences at the Navy SEAL base.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in there and seen things that no civilian will ever see.
Right.
And with my relationship there with the captain of the SEAL base, and And then like, that's a different kind of leadership.
Right.
And redefining what hard is. Like,
Yeah.
like today's a hard day, maybe.
Yeah.
That's not a hard day down at that SEAL base.
Right.
And I think that's important.
So I reached out when I knew you were coming in. I reached out to Ingrid and I said, send me some pictures of Dallas that that I can't get off the web. And she sent my two favorite ones, and I want to talk about this because it does encompass discipline and fitness. And I said in my introduction about Leadville. You're a 10-time finisher of the Leadville 100. And so for those of you who don't know, Leadville is a little town in Colorado. It's at 10,000 feet. So the race starts at 10,000 feet elevation, and it goes up to, you get as high as
just under 12, I think, somewhere in there.
So you 2,000 feet of climbing over 100 miles and then descending and that whole thing. And there's a handful of people that have got the big silver belt buckle for having completed it 10 times. You're one of those guys. What is it about that sort of, and when you talk about people who are like ultra, that like to suffer, I've never known you, Dallas. Before cycling was even a thing, I remember you were out like hitting it on your bike all the time. Cycling's not necessarily the most recommended fitness for a hockey player because it's slow twitch, not fast twitch. At least that's my understanding. How did you find yourself as a former pro hockey player doing one Leadville 100, let alone 10?
All off of a challenge. We had hired I'll try to make this as short as possible. I was working in player development with the Toronto Maple Leafs. The coach at the time was really upset with the team's VO2 max. Now, not that I think VO2 max has a whole lot to do with anything in hockey, but hey, that was on his radar.
Right.
I heard him bring it up. I saw him bring it up. I went to him, said, "Hey, if this is a big deal, let's hire somebody to get our team looked after." So we hired a group. It was Chris Carmichael. Who had rode in the Tour de France, has been an incredible cycling coach after his career. Probably the best in the business at one time. And so we hired them. We developed a relationship, and him and I used to go back and forth. Like, he would bug me about how soft he thought we were as hockey players, and I would call him a little skinny cyclist, and we went back and forth, and then one day he goes, "Hey, you think you're so tough? Why don't you come and you and I'll race at this race called the Leadville 100?" I'd never heard of it. I said, "All right, let's get it on." Now, he killed me in the race, but it is that race is really special to me. Like, did it 10 years in a row. It is the best day. And it is the worst day. There are at least 20 times during that day you want to quit, like you do. Mm-hmm. And it's taken me anywhere from 10 hours and 15 minutes right to, like, to be considered a finisher. You've got to get it done in under 12. One year I had a ton of problems with my bike, and I had to basically come in with both brakes rubbing badly, and I got in at like 10:57 or something.
Wow.
Like, but that is it's one of those. It's interesting because it's one of those things when things get hard. It's one of my reference points where I'll go like, "Oh man, this is a hard training day," or this is just a hard day in general.
Yeah.
Like, whatever's going on, and like, you've got all these reference points of things to compare it to maybe take a little off your day that remind you, hey, this isn't that hard today. But it is one of my reference points because it's a nasty race. But like I said, it's the greatest day ever as well. Every year you go, you say when you're done, I'm never coming back here. Right. I am never, ever coming back here. And about a week later,
pain has a short memory.
Yeah, that's right.
No, that's a great story. I think we're going to leave it there for today. Dallas, I know you're busy. You're in town. You got a game tomorrow against the Canucks. Best of luck in that. I really appreciate your time, and I'm so happy to see you today. It's good to be with you. Thanks, bud.
All right, bro. Thank you.
We're going to leave it there. And I think the takeaway is be what you want to see. So thanks, Dallas. And we'll see you again soon.